Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about my top favorite foundations. I have 8 foundations to talk about here, and they range from stick foundations to powder foundations to more traditional liquid foundations, and they range in coverage from very light skin tints all the way to full coverage. So if you'd like to see my top foundations and my thoughts on all of them, just keep on watching. I think I'll start with my liquid foundations, and I'm gonna go from the lightest coverage to the most full coverage. My top pick for a really light coverage, it's not even really a foundation, it's more of a skin tint. Very light veil of pigment in here. This is the Chanel Le Beige Water Fresh tint, and I have it in the shade Light, which is the lightest shade you can get. It just gives the most beautiful finish to the skin. It does not add much pigment or coverage at all, but it gives almost like a filter effect. It gives a really nice, moisturized, beautiful finish to the skin. It has pigment particles suspended in water, so you have to blend them together in order to mix everything and get that beautiful finish on the skin. It does dry down more from what I have right here. It's still quite wet and quite a concentrated layer that I have on my hand here, but I find that my favorite way to apply this is actually with my fingers. I just pump into my fingers and then kind of blend it together with my fingers and then further blend it as I'm applying it to my face, and I find that just works very easily and quickly and really gets the product on in the best way possible. So the Chanel Water Fresh tint is my top choice for a skin tint or very light coverage foundation. The next one I wanted to talk about is the Makeup Forever Reboot foundation. This is a really beautiful foundation. It certainly has more coverage than the Chanel tint. I would consider it a light to medium coverage. Kind of starts out light, and if you want to build it up a little bit to kind of a light medium, you can get it there. But I just think this gives the most beautiful fresh finish. It's more toward the dewy side, I guess, but I don't consider it extremely dewy. It's more of just like a natural, glowy, dewy radiance to it, but as I said, it's not really overly greasy, but it gives a beautiful, fresh, moisturized look to the skin. And it's certainly one of my most dewy foundations. This is about as dewy as I tend to go with my foundation. There are different types of glowing foundation. Dewy to me is the type that's really, it almost looks kind of wet on the skin, and that's what this would lean into that category, although not overly so. And then there are other types of glow, like you can get a radiant matte, or you can do what I've done today and what I'm going to talk about later, which is to mix a glow product into a more matte foundation. I really like the effect of that because it gives the beautiful sort of perfecting quality and blurring quality that matte formulas can give, but it adds in that glowing quality at the same time, which gives this beautiful sort of translucency, or the illusion of a translucency to the skin. So that's one of my favorite combinations, but I'll get into what I love to use for that more later. But that's just to share sort of an example of the different types of radiance that you can get in a foundation, and the Makeup Forever is more toward the dewy side. I have mine in the shade Y218. They don't really have light enough shades in this range, although it's quite a light coverage, so you can kind of blend it out to make it work, but I do wish that they had a lighter neutral shade. This is all right though. I can get away with this when I'm at my fairest, although it's not my favorite if I want a really true to skin sort of color on my face, but this is also great for the summertime and is really more matched to my summertime skin tone, or at least the skin tone that I like to look like I have in the summertime. After I recorded this video, I realized that I had actually forgotten to mention my all-time #1 favorite foundation, which is the Sisley Cushion Foundation. And I think I forgot about it because it's really not an everyday go-to option for me. It's very expensive, and so I reserve it for special occasions or when I really feel like my skin needs a boost. If I've been having a bad skin week or a few bad days and I'm just tired of that and I really want something that's going to make my skin look super healthy and make me feel confident in my skin. And it has a beautiful radiant, it's actually more dewy than the Makeup Forever Reboot, but still a really beautiful finish. There's not very much product in the cushion, and so for that reason and because of the price, I can't rely on it for every day. but it is definitely my best foundation. I have nothing else that really does for my skin what the Sisley cushion does. It does have a terrible shade range though. There are only 3 shades in this range, which is quite abysmal, but I do wear shade 2 and that's the right shade for me. I would say it has a light medium coverage. It's about the same coverage level as the Makeup Forever Reboot. So I'm sorry I forgot to mention it while I was doing this video, but I definitely just wanted to throw in a little piece about that because it's my #1 all-time favorite foundation. Next up, this is also a more sort of dewy foundation. It's a glowy foundation, not quite as wet looking of a dew finish as the Makeup Forever one has, but still more than like a radiant matte. It's definitely a more radiant satin type of formula. This is the Chanel Sublimage l'Essence de Teint foundation. It's very expensive. I didn't pay full price for it. I did a whole video reviewing this foundation where I explained I was able to use points toward buying this basically, but I've really come to love this foundation. I have it in the shade BD01, which is technically a golden undertone shade, and you can kind of see that goldenness to it, but I really don't mind that shade actually. It's grown on me quite a lot. It's still very, very fair, so I appreciate that about it, and I actually don't find it too yellowy. It seems to me to be a very balanced tone for a golden tone. You can definitely see the golden tones in there, but it's not too yellowy. It almost looks like it might have a little bit of, I don't know, maybe like some olive undertones in it that kind of balance out the yellowness very nicely. So it's almost like an olive gold undertone. I really like this shade. It's definitely not my true foundation match, but I can wear it quite easily because it's fair enough, although a different tone. I would consider this more of a medium coverage. You can put it on to kind of a light medium coverage, or you can use a little bit more and get it to a medium. But I don't like to build this one up very much because I do feel it on my skin if I put too much on. So my favorite way to use this is just one pump and that's it. And that'll cover my whole face with a beautiful light medium coverage. It just perfects the skin, adds this beautiful glow, and I think it's different from everything else that I have, and I really like this formula and this shade as well. I should mention for both this one and for the Makeup Forever Reboot that I showed earlier, my preferred way to apply that is to pump it onto the back of my hand, then dot the pigment onto my face, and then use a foundation brush to blend it out. And my go-to foundation brush that I use the most out of all my foundation brushes is definitely the Sonia G Fusion brush. This is the Jumbo Base, and it's a perfect foundation brush. It has a mixture of synthetic and natural goat hair fibers in it, and it just does such a beautiful job of blending out my foundations, and I especially love it for these types of sort of medium or light to medium coverage foundations. It just does the best job with those formulas. Now the last liquid foundation I wanted to talk about is the Shiseido Synchro Skin Self-Refreshing Foundation. This was one of my favorites last year, and it has remained one of my favorites this year, and I'm actually wearing it right now mixed with something else, which I'll talk about in a second. But this is definitely the most full coverage foundation that I have, but I love how versatile it is because you can shear it out to be a more medium coverage. You can mix it with other things, again, to get more of a sort of medium coverage, or you can build it up to that full coverage, which I don't really do. But I find that the pigment is so powerful in this that even when it's at a medium coverage, it does the best job out of any of my foundations of really covering anything that I need to be covered. So I really love to go for this one when I want a bit of more coverage than I normally go for with my more light or medium coverage foundations. It just has that little extra boost of pigment in it that covers without looking dry or cakey or unnatural. It's a very beautiful finish, and for such a high coverage foundation, looks very natural on the skin. It's more of a matte finish, but not a dry matte. It really works with the skin, just settles so beautifully and wears really, really well throughout the day as well. I pretty much never wear this on its own anymore. My favorite way to wear it is to mix it with the Auric Glow Lust. I have the Auric Glow Lust in the lightest shade. This is the newer revamped Morganite shade, which is a perfect, very fair skin tone shade of this product. I love that Auric product, and I love to mix it with this. it gives that finish that I was talking about. That sort of glowing or radiant matte finish, and it allows me to have a beautiful fresh looking skin, but with the coverage that I sometimes want and need. And the Shiseido has a thicker formula to it. It's quite thick. I think it's quite packed with pigment, but it doesn't feel dry or overly matte or anything. There's still a really beautiful feel, but quite packed with pigment. And the shade that I have is 110 Alabaster, which is quite a good shade for me. It's quite neutral. It almost looks like it has a touch of gray in it, but I really actually like this for my skin tone, especially when it's mixed with the Auric, which has a little bit more life to it. They go together really well, and I like how they work on my skin to sort of tone down the redness that I tend to get in my skin. And when I'm applying that Shiseido product, and even when it's mixed with the Auric, my favorite way to apply it is with a sponge, and my favorite sponges are the Real Technique sponges. Normally they're orange, but I found these limited edition beautiful mint green ones on Amazon that I love. And I just find that the damp sponge does the best job of allowing the finish to remain natural and not let the product build up too much, but still giving me enough coverage that I want from the product. Now moving into stick foundations, I have two that I want to talk about, and I've talked about both of these on my channel before. First is the Westman Atelier Vital Skin Foundation Stick. I have used this in both the shades N and 0, and I find that the shade N is better for me. It's a lighter shade. And this is the shade 0 actually, though. I don't know where my N is right now. But this is just such a beautiful, like, this is a really undetectable kind of foundation. So if you really want to go for a proper no makeup look, that no one's going to be able to tell that you have makeup on, if you have the right shade of this, this is going to do that for you. It has enough coverage that it can cover up blemishes a little bit, but not enough that it's going to totally conceal them. But it's just going to sort of take the attention away from them and just cover them over a little bit, and it doesn't cling in any way. It has a beautiful, just natural moisturized finish. It's not dewy, it's not matte, it's just like very, very natural, fresh, like true skin-like finish. I think it's just a beautiful formula. I've gone through a whole one of them, or I went through most of the shade, and I saved a little bit just so I'd be able to compare the two shades over time, because this is the shade 0. I wanted to try it out as well, but when I run out of this one, I'm going to go back to the shade N, because that's my preferred shade. And my favorite way to use this is for a no makeup look. And when I'm doing that, I'm just putting it in strategic areas. I'm not really covering my whole face with this product. So I like to put it in certain areas that I just want a little bit of coverage on. My favorite brush to use for that is the Mini Base from Sonia G. It's just the perfect size to blend out smaller areas, but it's not too small that it's going to take forever to blend. It's a really quick blending tool. And the density, and again, this is a combo of natural and synthetic fibers, and that combo and the density of the bristles makes it really, really perfect for blending out stick foundations. I also love to use this to blend out my other favorite stick foundation, which is the Merit. This is kind of like a foundation concealer hybrid, and this is the most similar to the Westman Atelier out of anything that I have, but this has actually more coverage, and I think it has a longer wear time than the Westman Atelier. The Westman Atelier, I can't really rely on it if I need it to be wearing all day. For me, it kind of starts to really wear down, and I would need to reapply or apply something else after probably about 2 or 3 hours even. It wears down very, very quickly on my skin at least, but the Merit lasts a lot longer. You could rely on this for your all-day foundation, and it has that bit more coverage, where the Westman Atelier is probably a light coverage, I would say. The Merit is more of a light medium to medium coverage. I have the Merit in the shade Bone, which is a little bit deep for me now. This is the lightest cool tone shade. I'd be curious to see what the lightest neutral shade is, if it's deeper than this or not, but I do just find this, it's a little bit too deep for me right now. But I really love the formula of this, and I think that if you wanted a stick foundation / concealer with a bit more coverage and more staying power than the Westman Atelier, this Merit one is a great way to go, but it still has that beautiful natural you could definitely get away with this for a no makeup as well. Last but not least, I have two powders to talk to you about. These are powder foundations, not setting powders or finishing powders. The first one is another Makeup Forever product. This is the Matte Velvet Skin Powder Foundation. I have it in the shade R210, and this has a beautiful level of coverage. It's kind of like the Shiseido Synchro Skin in the sense that it gives a good amount of coverage. I would say it's medium, that you can build up to a more full coverage. It's really hard to see it swatched there, but it's a beautiful formula. It is a velvety matte finish and looks very beautiful on the skin. And then the other powder I wanted to talk about, I'm going to kind of talk about them together, is the Fenty powder foundation. I have this in the shade 100, which is just, this shade is such a joy for me because it's so light and it's really useful for me because of that. I can use it as an all-over foundation. I don't tend to use powder foundations all over my face. The way I really love to use these is almost as like a setting powder or a touch-up powder, or something that can bring definition back into the face or clean up certain areas of the face. So I really like powder foundations for like cleaning up around the eyes after I've done my eyeshadow. If there's some that got sort of over blended or got into the wrong area, I can really tone that down and kind of blanket out with these powders. I also love especially this Fenty one because it's so light, for really lightening and brightening up certain areas of the face. When you have very, very fair skin like I do, it can be very easy for color products to start to overwhelm your face. And they can get into areas that you don't really want them, so they could spread out too much, like bronzer or blush are kind of the worst offenders for this type of thing. You can overblend or get them spread into areas that you don't want them, like you don't really want blush and bronzer down on this area of the face. Sometimes they get too far in, close into the nose, or I put too much over the nose and then I just kind of need to tone it down around the sides or even on the bridge of the nose itself, under the eyes too, and like right in this area. I tend to get too much color, or I also have a little bit of more redness in this area of my face. So I really love the Fenty powder for brightening up those areas and making sure that the face doesn't all of a sudden look too dark or like it just has too much color all over the place on it. This is really perfect for that. But it also works beautifully as an all-over foundation if you wanted to do that. Makeup Forever one I like to use in the same way, although it's not as bright and light, so it's not as good for that purpose, especially in the winter when my skin is very, very fair. But this is good for kind of a less intense cleanup job, or just to add a little bit of extra coverage on areas where you might have blemishes or something. It's really good for that because it has that higher coverage. Again, this is a medium to full coverage. The Fenty, I would say, is a light medium to medium, but really more light medium level of coverage. Both have beautiful matte finishes on the skin, and both I just love for the versatility and how they make my life easier when I'm doing my makeup and if I've made any sorts of mistakes. So that was all the foundations that I wanted to talk about. Let me know what your favorite foundations are. I hope this was helpful or at least interesting to you. Let me know if you have any other questions or comments below. I always love to see those. And if you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd love for you to do so. Thanks again so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.